$90 a month. That is what I watched my daughter hand over to a grooming chain every single month for almost a year, just to keep the rust-colored streaks off her little dog's face. Poppy is a Bichon mix, white as a dinner napkin except for the 2 dark tear tracks running down from her eyes, and every 4 weeks Emma would drive across town, pay the bill, and drive home with a dog who looked clean for about 11 days before the stains crept back in. I watched her do this for months before saying anything. When I finally asked why she did not just handle it herself, the groomer had already given her the answer. It's genetic, some dogs just do this, you'll always need the treatment. That is the line the whole business runs on. It is also not true. The fix runs under $5 total, most of it sitting in a normal kitchen already. But before I hand it over, there is a letter sitting in a government file that the company selling the other option, the pill you buy off a shelf, thinking it is the safer, more natural choice, very much did not want written down. If your dog's stains have been sitting there so long you've stopped even seeing them, this is especially for him. If you have a dog with a white or light-colored face, you already know the look. 2 rust-colored tracks running down from the inside corners of the eyes, sometimes just a shadow, sometimes dark enough that strangers ask if the dog got into something. It is one of the most searched, most argued about cosmetic problems in the entire dog world, and almost everything you have been told about it is either incomplete or being sold to you by someone with a financial reason to keep it that way. Poppy came to Emma as an 8-week-old puppy, pure white, the kind of white that makes people stop on the sidewalk. By 4 months old, the streaks had shown up under both eyes, faint at first, then dark enough that Emma started avoiding pictures of her from the front. At her first checkup, the vet glanced at it for maybe 4 seconds and said something close to what almost every owner of a white dog eventually hears. Some dogs are just prone to it. It is in the breed. Keep the area clean, and if it bothers you, a groomer can handle the deeper staining. Nobody in that room asked what Poppy was eating. Nobody wondered what was coming out of the tap into her water bowl. And nobody mentioned that the 2 things doing the damage were already sitting in Emma's kitchen and her own plumbing, free for the fixing, the whole time. So I went and looked into it myself, the way I always end up doing once somebody in a white coat hands me an answer that sounds inherited rather than worked out. Dogs process a compound called porphyrin, an iron-heavy waste product, differently than we do. In a person, most of it leaves through the liver and the bile. In a dog, a good share of it comes out through the tears themselves, along with the saliva and the urine. That reddish-brown color is not dirt, and it is not decay. It is iron oxidizing the moment it hits air and light, staining whatever fur sits wet against it the longest. On a dark or brindle-coated dog, this happens exactly the same way, every time. You just cannot see it under the darker fur. Which means the "it's just genetic" line is only half true, and half true is worse than a flat lie because it sounds complete. The breed does decide how the tears drain, whether they run properly down the tear duct or spill over and run down the face instead. Some breeds, the flat-faced ones especially, have shallower eye sockets and ducts that were never built to keep up. But how much porphyrin the body is producing in the first place and how long that fluid sits wet against the fur before someone wipes it off, those are not fixed. They are levers. And almost nobody who profits off cleaning up the mess ever mentions to you that a lever exists. There is more sitting under the surface than just the tear ducts too. Teething puppies run heavier tears for a stretch, and then it settles down. Ingrown eyelashes and lid abnormalities can do it in specific dogs. So can a low-grade food sensitivity that never rises to the level of a full allergy, the kind that just leaves a dog a little more inflamed, a little wetter around the eyes, all the time, without ever looking sick enough for anyone to flag it. A 4-second glance during a routine checkup explains none of that, because a 4-second glance is what a checkup is built for, not a real look at the bowl. It is also not a coincidence which dogs show up searching for this the most. Maltese, Bichon, Shih Tzu, Poodle, Lhasa Apso, some Cocker Spaniels, almost every breed built with a shallow eye socket and a light-colored coat that shows the staining instead of hiding it. A big dark shepherd can carry the exact same underlying tear chemistry his whole life and nobody ever notices, because there is nothing pale for it to show up against. The industry did not create a new problem for these smaller breeds. It found the one group of dogs where an old, ordinary bodily function suddenly became visible, and therefore marketable. Picture the waiting room at Poppy's vet for a second, because it explains a lot. A framed poster of a golden retriever on the wall, a rack of prescription diet bags for sale by the register, and a tech who spends 4 minutes on the whole visit and maybe 40 seconds looking at the dog. That room is built to move dogs through, not to sit down with an owner and go through a bag of kibble ingredient by ingredient. Nobody working in it is a bad person. The system underneath them was just never built to ask the one question that would have solved this in a week. Add up what that 4-second glance costs a family over a year. $90 a month at the groomer comes to over $1,000 a year for a service that never once touches the reason the stains keep returning. For the more stubborn cases, some vets will offer something more aggressive, a nasolacrimal duct flush, where the dog is sedated and the tear ducts are irrigated directly. Realistic pricing on that runs $200 to $500, more if it turns into a surgical correction. For a cosmetic problem, on a dog who is otherwise completely healthy, nobody sedates a dog to fix a $2 water problem, but plenty of people will sedate one before they will change the food. There is no accident in any of that. A groomer who tells you the stains are genetic gets you back on the schedule next month. A clinic that offers a procedure gets paid for the procedure. Neither one of them makes a cent off a bag of dog food you already own, or a pitcher filter you already have sitting in the fridge, so neither one of them has much reason to walk you through it. Nobody is lying to your face, exactly. They are just never volunteering the answer that does not put money in their register. It also helps to know who actually owns the register these days. A lot of the neighborhood grooming shops that used to be one person with a table and a pair of clippers have been bought up over the last decade by larger pet care chains and private equity groups, the same kind of roll-up that has been buying up independent veterinary clinics across the country. Once a shop gets folded into one of those chains, pricing tends to standardize upward in add-on packages, the recurring memberships, the specialty tear-stained shampoos, the monthly bundles tend to multiply. Emma's groomer was not some independent lady doing her best. It was a location inside a chain with a name you would recognize instantly, running the same $90 package on every white dog that walks through the door in 3 states. Watching Poppy's face never fully clear up reminded me of something I had not thought about in years. In my early 20s, I spent a stretch backpacking through Nepal and into Tibet, and one of the places I ended up staying nearly 3 weeks was a small monastery in the hills above the Yarlung Valley, taken in by monks who fed me in exchange for hauling water and firewood every morning before the sun cleared the ridgeline. That monastery kept dogs, small ones, not the big mastiff type you picture guarding a Tibetan doorway, though there was one of those too, chained loosely near the gate. More furniture than threat most days. The small dogs lived inside, underfoot, sleeping on the stone floors near the incense braziers where the smoke hung thick enough to sting your eyes within the first hour. Their whole job was to bark first. The mastiff outside handled anything that actually needed handling. The little ones just had to notice. The monk who looked after them was an old man named Lobsang, missing most of his teeth, who spoke maybe 40 words of English and used every one of them sparingly. His favorite of the small dogs was called Norbu, which means jewel, and Norbu earned the name. White as the snow line above the monastery roof, face perfectly clean, not a mark under either eye. At an age Lobsang guessed at somewhere past 12, in a room full of dust and butter lamp smoke that would have wrecked a lesser dog's face inside a month. I remember asking him, through a mix of gestures and the little Nepali I had picked up along the way, how he kept that dog so clean living in a place with that much dust and smoke around him constantly. He did not really answer with words. He walked me to the kitchen and pointed at a pot of leftover meat and barley cooling for the dogs, then walked me over to the cistern where they caught snowmelt runoff off the roof for drinking water, then made a small motion with his own hand across his face, wiping. That was the whole explanation. Fresh food, clean water, and a hand that bothered to wipe a dog's face every morning before the day started. He said one full sentence to me in his broken English, the only complete sentence I remember him saying the whole 3 weeks I stayed there. No dye, no dust, clean. I did not think about that sentence again for almost 15 years. Not until I was standing in Emma's kitchen looking at Poppy's face and realized I had already been handed the answer, sitting in a memory I had never bothered to unpack. It turns out Lobsang's little dogs had a real name and a documented history behind them. once I looked into it properly years later. They were almost certainly descended from Lhasa Apsos, bred for centuries specifically inside Tibetan monasteries as interior sentinels, the dog that barked first so the much larger mastiff outside could handle whatever actually showed up at the gate. For most of their history, money never changed hands for one of these dogs at all. The American Kennel Club's own history of the breed notes that selling a Lhasa Apso simply was not permitted. A monastery would part with one only as a gift, and only to someone the monks had decided had earned it. The first breeding pair to reach the United States arrived in 1933, a personal gift from the 13th Dalai Lama to an American who had earned that same honor. None of that history mentions tear stains, because for the monks keeping these dogs there was nothing to mention. Nobody was marketing a treatment because the problem barely existed at the scale we have it at now. Not because the dogs were built differently, but because nobody was feeding them out of a bag and nobody was filling their water dish from a pipe. European shepherds working with their own light-coated dogs landed on a version of the same idea centuries earlier and half a world away, a cooled chamomile rinse for irritated eyes. Clean water, real food, something gentle wiped across the face when it needed it, arrived it independently more than once. Few owners ever hear about the near miss sitting underneath all of this. A pristine white face on a small dog used to be the normal, boring, expected outcome, in places with worse dust and worse air than most American living rooms will ever see. It only turned into a $1,000 a year problem once the diet and the water changed underneath these dogs and an entire industry found a way to sell the symptom back to the people who caused it without ever telling them so. This is what a real veterinarian will tell you once you get one talking honestly instead of reciting the breed line off a chart. Dr. Jones, a vet who has built a channel around actually explaining this stuff instead of just billing for it, has said flatly on camera that lower quality commercial kibble, the kind padded out with fillers and fortified with cheap synthetic iron just to hit a number on a nutrition label, directly increases how much porphyrin a dog's body ends up dumping out through the tears. He would not name the brand on camera. He did not have to. Anybody who has read the back of a discount bag of dog food already knows roughly which one he meant. Well, water matters just as much as the food. City tap water carries mineral content, sometimes a fair amount of iron itself, depending entirely on where you live and what is running through the pipes that year. Owners who switch a stained dog off tap water and onto filtered or distilled water report the staining fading over roughly 6 weeks, and the change holding for years afterward as long as they stick with it. One owner in a comment thread I read described watching her Maltese face lighten so gradually she almost missed it, until a photo from 2 months earlier made the difference impossible to unsee. Another had spent years being told her Boston Terrier stains were simply permanent, until a trainer of all people suggested feeding 7 to 10 fresh blueberries with each meal, and within about a year the tracks were gone. It is thousands of ordinary owners noticing the same handful of things independently, not a controlled study, which for a problem like this one is close enough to proof that you can act on it. There is one thing worth flagging before we go any further, because it decides whether the letter I mentioned at the start actually matters to your dog or just makes for an interesting story. The pill bottle sitting on the shelf next to the shampoo, the one marketed as gentle and natural, is not automatically the safer alternative to a groomer's chemical treatment just because the label says supplement. What is actually printed on that federal letter changes what that bottle is worth to you, and we will get to exactly what it says. So here is the actual routine, the one that replaced Emma's $90 a month subscription, roughly in the order Lobsang laid it out for me, without ever knowing he was laying out anything. Start with the water. If you are on city tap water, switch the bowl over to filtered or distilled water. A basic pitcher filter runs around $20 and lasts months before it needs replacing. If you already drink filtered water yourself, you are one open cupboard away from fixing half of this problem for free. Second, take a real look at what is actually in the food. You do not need to switch brands entirely or spend a fortune doing it. Cut back on anything with corn, wheat, or a long list of dyes and synthetic vitamin blends stacked near the top of the ingredient list, and add real animal protein on top of what is already in the bowl. 2 or 3 tablespoons a day of plain cooked chicken, sardines packed in water, or scrambled egg cost pennies, and most dogs treat it like a gift rather than medicine. Third, the real stain removal step, the part that gets the face looking clean again while the diet and water changes work underneath. Take a small amount of organic, unrefined coconut oil, about a quarter teaspoon for a dog puppy size, 10 to 15 pounds, scaling up for bigger dogs. Warm it slightly between your fingers and work it gently into the stained fur twice a day, morning and evening, for about 2 weeks. It does not sting, and most dogs will actually sit still for it, which is more than you can say for a spray bottle aimed at their face. Alongside that, brew a plain black or green tea bag, let it cool to warm rather than hot, and hold the damp bag against the stained corner of the eye for 30 to 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times a day. The natural tannins in the tea lift pigment out of fur the same way they would lift a stain out of a shirt left to soak. Run this alongside the coconut oil for the same 2-week stretch, and you will usually see the tracks start lightening within the first week, mostly faded by the end of the second in mild to moderate cases. Older, more deeply set stains that have been there for years can take longer, sometimes a month or 2 of consistent effort. I want to be straight about that instead of promising an overnight miracle, because an overnight miracle is exactly the kind of promise the people selling you the subscription love to imply and never deliver. Emma ended up doing all 3 of these standing at her kitchen counter most mornings before work, Poppy tucked between her knees, coffee maker running behind them both. Once she had the rhythm down, it took less than 2 minutes total, which is a strange thing to realize once you have already paid a groomer for a year to do something that fits inside a coffee brew cycle. If you want to take it one step further, some vets will also point to a small daily dose of vitamin C, roughly 100 milligrams for every 20 pounds of body weight, as support for how the body processes that excess iron in the first place. Start at half that dose for the first week to make sure it sits well with your dog's stomach, since too much too fast can loosen things up. This one is optional, worth trying if the basics alone are not moving fast enough for you, but the water, the food, and the daily wipe are doing the bulk of the work. Now the detail that decides whether this whole routine helps or accidentally makes things worse, the part almost nobody says plainly. Lobsang's whole approach came down to keeping things simple and gentle around a dog's face, and that instinct turns out to matter here more than anywhere else. Keep anything acidic away from the eye itself. Apple cider vinegar and hydrogen peroxide show up constantly on home remedy lists for tear stains, and both of them will sting and irritate the eye badly if even a drop gets in, which at that close range happens more often than people expect. If you want a little extra antibacterial help beyond the tea and the coconut oil, a light dab of plain colloidal silver on the surrounding fur, never in the eye itself, is the safer route. And if you ever see swelling, thick discharge, or your dog pawing at the eye like it is in real pain, that has stopped being a tear stain. And what you are looking at now is an infection or an injury that needs an actual veterinarian that day, not a home remedy and not a wait and see. Lobsang's rule again, basically, real food, clean water, and a face that gets wiped instead of left alone. Nothing harsh, everything past that is just detail. Do this consistently and you stop paying anyone a monthly fee to manage a symptom that was never that complicated to begin with. You are no longer funding a grooming chain's recurring revenue model, and just as important, you are not about to fund whatever is sitting inside that little pill bottle instead. And if you are sitting there thinking this only matters for a puppy like Poppy, it does not. If you have got an older dog right now, 9, 11, 13 years old, whose face has carried the same rust-colored tracks for so long you genuinely stop noticing them, this works exactly the same way on him. The porphyrin lever does not care how long the stain has been sitting there. It only cares what is going into the bowl and the water dish starting today. Begin this week and you will see the same fading. Just give the older, more stubborn staining an extra month of patience before you judge whether it is working. It is worth doing even if you have made peace with the way the stains look. A senior dog whose eyes are constantly damp is a senior dog whose face stays irritated, and irritated skin under wet fur is exactly where a low-grade infection likes to set up shop, on top of everything else an old body is already managing. Fixing the water and the food is not just about how he looks in a photograph. It is one less irritation on a dog who has earned a little less discomfort, not more of it, in whatever years he has left. Because that pill bottle is exactly where a lot of tired owners land next. once they get sick of the groomer bill and go looking for something they can just add to the bowl themselves. Tear stain supplements sold at pet stores and online market themselves as natural, gentle, just a little daily support, nothing like a chemical groomer treatment. Emma almost bought one before I stopped her. I am glad I did, given what turned up once I went looking into what is in them. Here is that letter I mentioned back at the start, the one sitting in a government file that the companies selling those supplement pills would very much prefer stayed there. In August of 2014, the United States Food and Drug Administration sent a wave of warning letters to companies selling tear stain remover products after finding they contained tylosin tartrate, an antibiotic, without any approval to sell it as an animal drug at all. One of the companies named in that action, a manufacturer called PetAware, had done something even more direct than simply skipping the paperwork. In the FDA's warning letter to the company, the agency quotes the company's own signed admission that it left tylosin tartrate off the label on its export products, specifically so the shipments would not get flagged and detained by customs in the countries receiving them. Several other well-known tear stain brands from that same round of enforcement, names still sitting on pet store shelves today, were cited in the identical action for the identical undisclosed ingredient. An antibiotic, the kind of drug that is supposed to require a vet's involvement and an actual medical reason to use it, was quietly mixed into a bottle marketed as a gentle cosmetic supplement, sold to owners who genuinely believed they were choosing something safer and more natural than a chemical treatment at the groomer. Handing a dog daily unnecessary antibiotics for a purely cosmetic problem is not a small thing to shrug off. It is exactly the kind of low-level, constant overuse that helps breed resistant bacteria over time in the dog and potentially in the house around him. And it was disguised well enough, deliberately enough, that a federal agency had to put it in writing before most owners ever found out what they had been feeding their dog every morning. Two different sellers working both ends of the same problem. The groomer sells a recurring service that never touches the cause. The supplement aisle sells a pill that turns out to be an undisclosed drug. Neither one of them particularly wants you finding out that a $2 swap sitting in your own kitchen, the same one an old monk in the Himalayas worked out with no lab and no science degree, handles the entire problem for the both of them. Poppy's face cleared up completely within about 3 weeks of switching her water, swapping in real food, and running the coconut oil and tea routine every single day without skipping. Emma canceled the grooming subscription the same month. The stains have not come back in the better part of a year now, and the only ongoing cost is a jug of filtered water and a bag of decent food she was already going to have to buy anyway. It was never genetic, not in the way that means nothing can be done about it. Poppy did not have some defect written into her, and Emma had not done anything wrong feeding her that first year, not before anyone bothered mentioning that the food or the water even mattered. She was sold a subscription for a problem that a monk with a snowmelt cistern and a pot of barley solved for free, centuries before anybody thought to bottle it and sell it back to the very people who used to know how to do it themselves. If you have got a dog with that same rust-colored track running under his eye right now, whether he is 8 months old or 13 years old, it is not too late, and it was never his fault or yours. If you want the short version to go do this week, this is the whole thing. Filtered water in the bowl, a real food swap, or a spoonful of plain protein folded into what you already feed, and coconut oil with a cooled tea bag on the stains twice a day for 2 weeks, keeping anything acidic away from the eye the entire time. No part of that comes with a subscription attached. Tell me in the comments what breed you are dealing with and what you have already tried, because I read every one of them, and a fair amount of what ends up in these videos starts with something one of you mentioned first. And if you are done paying somebody monthly for a fix that a monk with a snowmelt cistern managed for free, subscribe. There is another bill like this one out there right now, still being charged to somebody's dog, and I am going to go find it.